It's great to be here today. And Peter, some time ago, had asked me to do the Sabbath school lesson, and as a good student, I looked at it on Wednesday. And when I looked at it, I went, Exodus 1. Oops, that was my sermon topic. So like Mr. Bean, I looked at it and went, what am I going to do? So I started to sort of do a wee bit of a panic, and I thought, well, I'm down in September, and you're still doing Exodus in Sabbath school. So I'm doing Exodus 19 this morning, so I'm going to beat the Sabbath school lesson. So I had to change my sermon and to what I advised Carmelina on Sunday, or what my theme would be. So Carmelina will be wondering, oh, that's not what you told me on Sunday. Well, that's why. Anyway, so that's how the cookie crumbles, as they say. Now, I remember when I first came into the church, and you'd hear these apocryphal stories, and people in sincerity would share, oh, did you hear about the hitchhiker who picked up this bloke on the side of the road, and he hopped into the back, and this car happened to be a convertible, and he said, this was back in the 1980s, and he said, the Lord is coming soon. And their eyes started to open like dinner plates. Then they looked around, gone. And of course they said, oh, that was an angel. And you hear these stories from time to time, and you wonder, and we're still 40 odd years after the event, and the one that I'm going to share with you is not an apocryphal story, but it sounds like one. And this comes to the time of when manna fell from heaven, but before we look at Exodus 16, there was a little mission house, and this mission place here was in central Angola. And in central Angola, this mission in 1939, their crops had failed and they were starving. And the mission director's wife got the entire congregation around and got them around to sort of pray, hey, look, we're starving here. We have no food. What are we going to do? Central Angola, you'll know, is a tropical place, and you'll think they would have plenty of rain, and in tropical places it's sort of, it rains. They measure it in metres, not in inches like they do here, or centimetres, I should say. But that's not the case of where they were. And I want you to think just for a moment what it would be like to starve. Okay, if you were to do out with church lunch today, oh yeah, could cope with that. Survive till tea time. Well, what about skipping tea and lunch? And you're looking round at the fields, and they are as dry as. And you've got months to wait until the next crop. And 1939, you can't go down to Woolies or Coles to buy your bottle of milk or your loaf of bread, nor can you go to the hole in the wall to get some money out, can you? What are you going to do? What would it be like to starve? I don't have a clue. I've never had to starve. I can only imagine what it'd be like. So, this is what they were staring down the barrel of is starvation now for months until the new crops can be planted and harvested before they can eat. So, mission director's wife gathers everyone around and they pray. And they prayed as in Exodus chapter 16, did you not give manna to the people back then? And they said, yep. They continued to pray. And one of the little girls goes outside and they see 6 people dressed in black suits there. And I said, here, little girl, and I quote, look around you. And what do you see? And I look around, and here is manna. And she races inside, relays the story to them. Look, we have manna. Everybody races out, and they see, and they were fed. And they were fed. And and you would say to me, Mark, are you telling me one of these hitchhiker stories? Well, I'm glad you asked that. Because Signs of the Times reported this event. And I know many of you are astute here, or readers of Signs of the Times, would go back and read the old story. And just says on the openings, we who are called upon to travel in heathen countries, I love the language that they used back then, are often impressed by the simplicity of faith exercised by those, and they report the story of manna falling. Now, what's interesting, I am not on Facebook, but if you were to Google this, you'd find the Signs of the Time article. Don't do it now. Put your phones away. I know it's tempting. Temptation's an awful thing, you know. But if you were to look, you would see on Facebook that manna continues to fall in this village on Wednesdays and Fridays. Interesting, isn't it? And they've even done tests on this in some laboratory in Brazil. And they tested all the vitamins and all that sort of thing, and it says, hey, this stuff's good for you. And it's good stuff. Manna from heaven. Now, one of the things as I was reading this story, and the fact that manna is still falling on Wednesdays and Fridays, would this convince people that God is real? Would you hear about this on your local ABC News Radio? Manna falls from heaven on Wednesdays and Fridays, not on your sweet bippy. Would you hear about that? So, you know, and there's a person who contacted the guy who came from the Namba mission who wanted to get some of the manna, and he brought it over to a general conference meeting. And so there's a picture from the Signs of the Times of manna that they had from the Namba mission. And so let us begin before we rip into Exodus 19, we'll just have a quick squiz at Exodus 16, and And we'll have a look at verses 1 to 4. And they were set out from Elim, and all the congregation of the people of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they had departed from the land of Egypt. And the whole congregation of the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness, and the people of Israel said to them, "Would that we have died in the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the meat and pots and bread to the full, for you have brought us here to the wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger." And the Lord said to Moses, "Behold, I'm about to rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion each day." Now, when you read that passage, you know that that passage is true and did happen. Why? Because God has done that miracle in 1939 and continues to do it on Wednesdays and Fridays. But the interesting thing, and I'll just go back to the previous slides that I had here, they seem to have a memory hold. These are reliefs that are found on in Karnak and in Egypt, which kind of shows a little bit of what life is like as a slave. Plenty of rights, plenty of privileges, plenty of food available, right? Somehow, they seem to have this memory that they lived as kings. Hardly. But they grumbled and they groaned, and they seemed to have forgotten what it was like as a slave and what God went through in order to deliver them. The parting of the Red Sea and the fact that judgment was passed on all the gods of Egypt, the 10 plagues. Surely, the memory is short, is it not? Memory is real short, and they grumbled, they were hungry. Where was their faith through this? All right. Okay, so they left Egypt, and now they're heading south toward Sinai. Now, save me walking over to the map. Sinai's down at the bottom. Sinai kind of looks like a little bit like Tasmania. So now we're in Hobart, all right? So they cross the Red Sea and they turn right. Where's Canaan? Where's Canaan? Does anyone know where Canaan is? It's over here. Oh, we turned right. Which way should we have gone? Shouldn't we be going straight ahead? Instead, they turned right. Moses, where are you leading us? Are you leading us up the garden path? Is that the garden path? Not much of a garden. No laughing. All right. All right. So this is looking from Mount Sinai down to the foot of Mount Sinai, and this is where they were parked. A couple of million people there, pegged their tents there, and this is Mount Sinai, and the bigger mountain is called Jabal Musa today, which means in Arabic, the mountain of Moses. Ras Safa is the one on the left. Don't ask me to spell that, by the way. And the one at the bottom there, the monastery of St. Catherine, It's always interesting at any place of significance. They like to build a church or a monastery, and it's been there since about the 5th century, rebuilt over times. And I just thought it might be interesting for us to have a wee squiz inside the place there. What's interesting about this monastery is that it has some of the oldest scrolls available. Some are even older than what the Vatican has. And so they will hop on a boat there and have a read of their scrolls. So interesting. So we'll go to the top of Mount Sinai. Again, any interesting spot? What do? You erect a church or a monastery, all right? So at the top here, you have here a monastery here, and I have not walked up there. I have not been up there, so but this is what it looks like, and even gets a bit of snow, as you can see. Pretty specky view, isn't it? And right next to it, surprisingly, is a Muslim mosque at the top there. Moses is highly regarded in the Muslim religion or Islam, and so they've erected a mosque there as well. And below this mosque here is the only cave, I'm told, that is on Mount Sinai. And that little cave there is a place that they believe that Exodus 34 happened. What's in Exodus 34? When Moses was hid in the cleft of the rock. All right, so that is the cave that they reckon that Moses was hid in there. And I know that someone's going to say, it doesn't look very big, does it? If you enlarge the photo, that will enlarge the cave. Okay? So, anyway, so at the top of the mountain is that church again, and this is where they believe that the 10 Commandments were given. All right, so let's rip into Exodus chapter 19. Just for a variety's sake, I'm going to ask Tony to read, and he's going to enjoy reading in a nice deep tone for me. From verse 19 down to most of the chapter, please.
19. Okay, as the blast of the ram's horn grew louder and louder.
Oh, verse 19, chapter 19, verse 1.
9.
Oh, sorry, chapter 19.
Yep.
Verse 1.
Verse 1. Okay. And the whole chapter.
Oh, almost. Till I say stop.
Okay. I'll listen out for that. Exactly 2 months after the Israelites left Egypt, they arrived in the wilderness of Sinai. After breaking camp at Rephidim, they came to the wilderness of Sinai and set up camp there at the base of Mount Sinai. Then Moses climbed the mountain to appear before God. The Lord called to him from the mountain and said, "Give these instructions to the family of Jacob. Announce it to the descendants of Israel. You have seen what I did to the Egyptians. You know how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, if you will obey me and keep my covenant, you will be my own special treasure from among all the peoples on earth, for all the earth belongs to me. And you will be my kingdom of priests, my holy nation. This is the message you must give to the people of Israel." So Moses returned from the mountain and called together the elders of the people and told them everything the Lord had commanded him. And all the people responded together, "We will do everything the Lord has commanded." So Moses brought the people's answer back to the Lord. Then the Lord said to Moses, "I will come to you in a thick cloud. Moses, so the people themselves can hear me when I speak with you. Then they will always trust you." Moses told the Lord what the people had said. Then the Lord told Moses, Go down and prepare the people for my arrival. Consecrate them today and tomorrow, and have them wash their clothing. Be sure they are ready on the third day, for on that day the Lord will come down on Mount Sinai as all the people watch. Mark off a boundary all around the mountain. Warn the people. Be careful, do not go up on the mountain or even touch its boundaries. Anyone who touches the mountain will certainly be put to death. No hand may touch the person or an animal that crosses the boundary. Instead, stone them or shoot them with arrows. They must be put to death. However, when the ram's horn sounds a long blast, then the people may go up on the mountain.
All right, thanks. Thanks, Tony. What verse was that one? All right. Okay, so you got some pretty dramatic scenes there, and it says that the Lord comes down, doesn't he? And so the people and Moses went up the mountain a couple of times there to seek agreement between him and God. And then God says that they were to consecrate themselves. And so they had to go through some rituals there, had to refrain from some things until and it says there, just going back to verse 13, and no stone or shot, whether beast or man, he shall not live, when the trumpet sounds at a long blast, that they shall come up to the mountain. And so it says on the third day. So Moses went up there several times, and at the beginning of the chapter, it says on the first moon there, and so it gives us a specific date here of April 17, 1450. Now in Sabbath school, they discovered that the Exodus happened on March 17, 1450. And so at the start of the week here, they go back and forth here. And so the various different days, and so for the next 3 days, they were to prepare themselves there to meet the Lord, which happened to be on the Sabbath, that they were to meet the Lord on the Sabbath. Now, the whole purpose of Exodus chapter 19 was to pave a way for a covenant between God and his people. And in order to ratify the covenant, God comes down to the people there. Then in Exodus 20, the terms of the covenant was established. God, in dramatic circumstances, with fire, rumblings, theophany, comes down and ratifies this covenant. Now, you'll also remember that on March 10, 1450, was the Passover, a week before the Exodus. What date did I say? March 17, 1450. 50 days after a Passover, you celebrate a feast called Pentecost. And when you do a comparison here of what's happening here, there's some similarities to Pentecost. You got fire, tongues of fire, you got theophanies. You got in Exodus 19 and 20, you got the commandments given, what was happened to the new covenant that was initiated in Acts chapter 2. You got that the law would be written where? On the hearts. And when we say that it's on the hearts, people sort of think, oh, well, there's no obligation to keep it now. So long as the thought's there, that's about as far as it goes. But that's not what it's saying. It goes to the intent. Everything's about motive here. You know, you can, the commandments, and the commandments are not so much thou shalt not, they are more promises in terms of relationship. Once you are in a relationship, you will want to keep the commandments. I'll come back to that in a tick. But here you got some similarities here between this and Acts chapter 2 here. You've got the initiating of the covenant with God's people that he had delivered out of Egypt by grace. Tony's going to read verse 4 for me of 19.
Verse 4. So you have seen what I did to the Egyptians. You know how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself.
God here has borne them by eagle's wings here, and I've got an actual photo here. Well, I've got a photo here of some eagle's wings here, and it's by grace that he has brought them out. This was a picture of some savvy hitchhiker who captured that, and so God saved them by grace. Then he gives them the law. All right, let's go back to the comparison of Pentecost with Acts chapter 2. You've got the Mount Sinai, the shaking of the wind. You've got both circumstances of theophanies. You've got the finger of God, which is synonymous with the Holy Spirit. The finger of God is used in the New Testament interchangeably with the Holy Spirit, and also you've got the new covenant that was instituted, the new covenant that was instituted in Acts chapter 2, and you've got the 10 Commandments that were given, that were written on the tablets of stone by the finger of God, and you've got the finger of God that was used, that was also written on the hearts through God's Spirit. And so you've got those that comparison there, which is quite fascinating, because people will say to you, oh, well, Acts chapter 2, people say by grace. Well, that's not true, because in Exodus, God redeemed his people by grace. The other thing here I want to come to is when the people were to come before God, they had to go through different rituals, didn't they? Now, this here was a picture taken in Shiraz in southern Iran at a mosque. And before they went into worship, they would have to wash their hands and arms before they were going to worship. And this was a ritual washing that they had to do here, and he was doing the same. Some mosques, you have to do it, not only that, but also snort salted water through the nose. And yeah, gross, I know, I get it. The purpose of that was to consecrate themselves before going to worship. In our world and our culture, we have this notion that it doesn't seem to matter how we come to God. It did matter back in the Old Testament. The people had to consecrate themselves. Now, I'm not suggesting that we set up a tap outside the church here and we start washing arms and legs and feet and this sort of thing. But what I am saying is that God is a holy God, that as we approach him, that we do so with an attitude and a disposition that is respectful of a holy God. Do you know what I'm saying? In our culture, we tend to bring God down to the size of my own mind and my own imagination. God came down on this mountain here with thunderings, rumblings and lightning, and God wanted them to come up to meet them. But we don't have time to look at Deuteronomy 5:5, where Moses says, reflecting on this, and Deuteronomy means second law, and Moses is giving a series of 9 sermons as his farewell speech, and he's reflecting on this. He said, you were too afraid to go up. Well, with all that rumblings and lightning and that, there's probably a good reason for that. But God comes down from heaven to Mount Sinai, to his people, makes a covenant with his people. He bore them on eagle's wings. He saved them by grace. You were just slaves. You were riffraff, if you like. There was nothing special about them, but God saved them by grace. Brings them out of Egypt, feeds them in the wilderness, brings them here, makes an agreement with them by grace, gives them commandments here. Commandments are 10 promises here. Bore you with eagle's wings. This is a relationship. The 10 commandments are 10 promises. When you enter into a relationship, this relationship is going to be so great that you won't want to have any other gods before me. You'll only want to worship me because there's only one God. You won't want to take my name. You want to enjoy the Sabbath. And you want to treat people right because, hey, this is a promise. Your mum and dad, you won't want to commit adultery, steal, lie. You want to have the right motive, intention of the 10th commandment of thou shalt not covet. There are 10 promises. Do you understand what I mean by relationship? And all of a sudden, these commandments that they have and the nature of this relationship changes. Because people have this idea that Exodus, that God is harsh, he's unforgiving, and he's too hard to approach. Anyway, let's skip. Where was God leading them to? As I mentioned, God was leading them to Canaan. But for some strange reason, they turned right instead of going straight ahead. Well, Tony's going to read verse 4 again. Sorry, mate. Got to make you work for your money.
Verse 4, chapter 19. You have seen what I did to the Egyptians. You know how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself.
Where was God leading them? Was he leading them to, was the ultimate object here, was it to lead them to Canaan or to lead him to himself? Is that staggering? All of it, we all the time think, the whole goal of all of this was to lead him to Canaan. Well, yeah, included that. But his whole object here was to lead them to himself. Is that good news? Is that relational? the people had to consecrate themselves. They had to do that for 3 days. Meets them on Sabbath, equivalent to Pentecost, initiates that covenant, leading you to myself. Come over to Exodus 22. Sorry, we'll do 24 first. 24, verse 9. Thanks, Tony.
Exodus 24:9. Then Moses, Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, and the 70 elders of Israel climbed up the mountain.
Climbed up the mountain, and what do they do next?
There they saw the God of Israel under his feet. There seemed to be a surface of brilliant blue lapis lazuli, so clear as the sky itself.
And next verse.
And though these nobles of Israel gazed upon God, he did not destroy them. In fact, they ate a covenant meal, eating and drinking in his presence.
Oh, hold on. What did they do? They what?
They were eating and drinking in
They
his
were
presence.
eating and drinking. Oh, this is language of covenant here. What do we do once a quarter here? What do we do? Communion. That's what you do when you initiate a covenant or remember a covenant. There was God himself eating and drinking with 70 elders, including those two, Nadab, Abihu, who was zapped in Leviticus 9 and 10. That was a terrible worship service that day, but that's another story. But the 70 elders there eating and drinking with God. Do you find that staggering? That blows me away. I want you to think about that as you next time you have communion, because I know people go, oh, communion, I'll stay away that day. And people will have a Sabbath off. No one here would do that, I know. But, I'm just talking about other churches. And one of the themes of Exodus is, and I promise I won't go too long, one of the themes of Exodus is graciousness. And the Jews would always count the verses. And do you know what the middle verse is in Exodus? And I know you've been busting to know this. Well, for your whole, this will just blow your mind. You've been awake all night thinking about, I wonder what the middle verse of Exodus is. Well, your sleepless nights are over. 22 and verse 26, please, Tony. Thanks.
22 and 26. If you take your neighbour's cloak as security for a loan, you must return it before sunset. This coat may be the only blanket your neighbour has. How can a person sleep without it? If you do not return it and your neighbour cries out to me for help, then I will hear, for I am merciful. You must not dishonour God or curse any of your rulers. You must not hold anything back when you give me offerings from your crops and your wine. You must give me your firstborn sons.
Okay, thanks for that. So the middle verse here is the latter part of verse 27. For that the only covering is your cloak. Well, it's a pretty innocuous verse, isn't it? And if he cries to me and I hear him for what? What does it say? I am. Some of yours says gracious, merciful. Other version says compassionate. I am. I am. So you know that phrase, I am, John 8. That's that phrase here. Middle verse, I am gracious. Why is it in the middle? Because God wants to, this is important to Jews, he wants to emphasise that God is merciful, gracious, compassionate. I'm merciful, gracious and compassionate. I brought you out of Egypt. I brought you on eagle's wings. and I brought you to myself. But what happened? Well, we discover that Moses was away, then went up to the mountain, and he was away for how long? 40 days. Very good. And when your boss is away, what do? The mice will. And what happened with the Israelites? 40 days, he's away. Where's he gone? What are we going to do, fellas? What does Aaron do? Well, we asked him for a few earrings, and there we boiled it up, and what did Aaron say?
Came out of the calf.
Say it louder.
Came out of the calf.
Of course. That's exactly how it transpired. Come on, Aaron. And what does God say? Moses, you better get down there. And when he got down there, they were into all sorts of stuff here that we won't go into detail here. 3,000 were killed that day. The Levites were instituted as priests. And do you know what's staggering out of this? Aaron was the leader here. The two I see. He survives. How come? You're the one who put the gold in the thing, and out comes a calf. You survive. Not only survives, he becomes what? The head priest or high priest. The high priest. Repentance, restoration, graciousness. Do you find that staggering? When that was such a serious breach, God restores. Is that good news? Amen. And yet we seem to view that God is harsh and judgmental. And God, because the covenant was broken and the commandments were broken, Moses disappears again, for another 40 days, and, lapis lazuli is carved out again, which happens to be a blue stone that's quite rare, valuable, only available in Afghanistan, of all places. So when you go there next on your round the world trip, you may wish to pick up some. But I'll close on this passage here. Remember I showed you the cleft of the rock? Moses wanted to see God. He says, look, you can't do that. We'll have to dim things down a bit. But he says this here. Exodus 34. And the Lord passed by before him and proclaimed. And the word pass by is a technical theological phrase that says this is an important moment in your growth. I passed you by. This is an important moment in Moses' life. The Lord God, a merciful God and a gracious, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness, keeping steadfast love for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, but will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers and the children and the children's children for the third and fourth generations. Now, the Lord passed by him. God is merciful. What else? He is what? Gracious. What else? What's another attribute here? Long-suffering. Slow to anger. abounding in steadfast love, faithfulness, keeping steadfast love for thousands of people. What it actually means is thousands of generations. In other words, for eternity. Apparently there's only been about 200 odd generations since creation. What's my point here? When it comes to our picture of God is incredibly important. If we view God as harsh, judgmental, unforgiving, we too will also be harsh, judgmental, and unforgiving and intolerant to others. If we view God as merciful, gracious, long-suffering, then we will find joy in living out 10 promises, but also the last 6 promises as we relate to one another. We will not lie, steal. We will not covet. We will not commit adultery, murder. Jesus expands on that in Matthew 6. And we will love one another. But do you know that is one of the biggest challenges that faces us as a church within Tasmania, is the ability to love and to forgive one another. That remains the biggest challenge to us as a church, and I wonder why. We need to understand through relationship, because God brings us to himself. He comes down to us. Let us consecrate our lives to him, walk with him, knowing that he loves us, given his life for us, that he is merciful, gracious, faithful, steadfast, and will show that to thousands of generations, to each one sitting here today.